Okay. Okay. We should be recording now. Okay. Yeah. So, sorry. So the next thing, the next thing I was going to say is that, um, yeah, is that it's better to have a solution than to not have one. So if there's no point trying to get the best solution but getting only 80% of the way there, it's usually a lot better just to have a simple brute force solution that you know works and runs. So that's the approach that I would like to take while we were solving these problems throughout the workshop. So yeah, um, first, does anyone have any questions about the problem? Are you sure you understand it? Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. So yeah, what do you guys think? Like, do you have any ideas about solving it? I see someone said that the base case is an empty string. So what technique are you using to solve this problem? Like, are you iterating through the string? Are you using recursion? Okay, thinking about recursion. Okay, and someone else wants to do basic traversal. Uh, no. So you won't be able to write code on your own in the TrackIT application. We won't actually focus too much on writing code. I mean, for some problems we might, like if it's easy, we'll go ahead and code it. But the purpose of this is more to understand how to solve the problem and get to the pseudocode. You can use the lead code link if you want to go to the code, but the mark is complete is essentially, yeah, like if you feel like you've understood the problem and you're able to solve it, that's when you would click mark as complete. So yeah, I'm seeing different thoughts here. Someone said you could do basic traversal. Um, what exactly do you mean by basic traversal? Start with a variable low as the first character, high as the last. Check that high and low are equal. They're not, return false. Okay. Yeah, exactly. It looks like um, someone has an idea as to how to solve this problem. So they said have a variable low for the first character and high at the last character, and then compare low and high. If unequal, return false, and else just move low and high inward. And they want to repeat this while high is greater than low. So um, yeah, so does anyone, uh, what are your thoughts about this? Yeah, exactly. So one person noticed that we need to be checking for white spaces. So where exactly would you do that? Yeah, yeah, white spaces and case. So where would you make those checks? And what would you do if you saw a white space? Okay, exactly. Skip the white space and ignore it. Yeah, exactly. The problem said ignore case. So if the problem says ignore case, and you can't just compare the characters, right? Because lowercase a is not equal to an uppercase a. So if you just compare the characters, that will return false. But if your palindrome is ignoring case, you want to treat a lowercase a and an uppercase a as the same. No. So we would rather you not post your solutions here. Um, yeah, just because other people may not have it already, and I want to be able to work through it with them. Okay, so if you saw white space, you'd move to the next part in the string. Okay, so you guys seem to have some pretty good ideas. So um, first, first, does everyone agree with this method? Like, does anyone see any errors? Do you think it won't work? If you think it works, then we can go ahead and try coding it, and then get to the parts about ignoring case and dealing with white spaces. But does everyone see the general idea of what we're trying to do? Okay, sounds good. So let's set my int low. So do you want low and high? What type should they be? Okay, I kind of gave it away. So, but yeah, so what should I set low to? What should I set high to initially? Okay, low equals 0. And how about high? Exactly. S star length minus 1. Remember, strings are 0 indexed. So the last character is at the position length minus 1. And now someone said we want to repeat all of this while high is greater than low. And what do we want to do in here? So I've done this part. So at this point, do we want to compare low and high? Or is there something else we need to do first? Exactly, check for white space. Okay, so someone suggested high is greater than equal to low. So yeah, we'll get back to this part later and discuss whether we want greater than or greater than equal to. For now, let's just leave greater than equal to. So we need to check for white spaces. So how do you want me to check for a white space? Or what what character do I check for a white space? Okay, yeah. Um, but I guess what I was trying to ask was, like, how do you want me to do it? Do you want me to check the character at position low, at position high, both of them? Do you want me to use an if statement, or do you want me to use something else? How do you think we should do it? If statements should work, check both individually. Okay, so let's say if the character at low is a white space, and what do you want to do inside of the if statement? Okay, and you want to check both individually. So if s dot char at high is a white space, and someone else actually said keep moving inward. So okay, low plus plus, high minus minus. And what do we need outside of the if statement? Once we're done with both these if statements, what do we want to do next? now are we ready to, yeah, exactly. So some people noticed that you want to keep moving inward until there is no more white space, right? Because think about this string. If I had something like this, right, and say low pointed to this white space, so the character at low is a white space, but now I move low forward. So now low goes to this next character, but this is also a white space. So I don't want to be comparing these white spaces. So I actually want to keep going forwards while I see a white space. And the same thing for high, because you could have multiple consecutive white spaces. Does that make sense to everybody? And do we need anything else inside of this while loop? Is there, if I keep incrementing low, is there any issue I could run into? Or if I keep decrementing high? Check for commas. Okay, okay, like in the example. Okay, yeah, exactly. So check for commas and the punctuation mark. But so you want me to, yeah, okay. And someone else also caught that low needs to be less than high. So that's actually what I was trying to get at. If I just have a bunch of spaces, then low could just keep moving to the right and then go to the end of the string. And then I would get a string, and then I would get an index out of bounds error. So I want to make sure that low is less than high. In both of these cases, I want to make sure that I'm not going out of bounds. And then a lot of you also said you want to check for punctuation marks. But how do I do that? I mean, the example has a comma and a colon, but I could put any number of things, right? I could put an open parentheses, I could put an angular bracket. So what do you think is the best way to do it? What characters are valid? Okay, yeah, regex is one way to do it, but Java will actually, exactly, you want to see if it's not an alphabet or number, right? So that's what I was actually looking for. And I believe Java has a character dot is alphanumeric function. So we can just say if the character is not alphanumeric, then we want to keep moving forward, right? And we'll do the same thing for high. Okay, so this looks good. As long as we have invalid characters, we keep moving forwards. Alphanumeric lets numbers, but we do want to consider numbers, right? Because it says that, like the question says to consider alphanumeric characters. So we probably want to include numbers in our comparisons. And once we're done with this, we can do what you guys were talking about. So if s dot caret low is not equal to s dot caret high, we can go ahead and return false. And after this, like you said, move low and high inward. So low would go forward, high would go backward. So do you see how low and high are kind of like two pointers here? And we're essentially, we have two pointers at both ends of the string, and we're essentially moving them both inwards. So let's try running this and see if we have any mistakes. Okay, I spelled numeric wrong. But yeah, does anyone have any questions about this problem? Okay, I think I got the API wrong. It might not be character.is alphanumeric. Um, yeah, so what am I checking for in line 6? So in line 6, you're essentially making sure that you skip over all the characters that are not letters or numbers, because by saying we only want to consider alphanumeric characters. So is letter or digit. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we got the wrong output here. So where do you think the error is? What have we not taken into account yet? Exactly. We didn't ignore cases, right? So where would we do that? You can just answer with the line number. 12. Exactly. So we so I guess how do you want to deal with that problem? How would you resolve this issue? Lowercase each character. Okay, that sounds good to me. So again, I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting this API call right. I think it's character.to lowercase. Um, but yeah, the compiler will tell us. And okay, this looks good. Um, can we discuss the time and space complexity of this code? O of n for time or space? Which one are you guys answering? Time. Okay. Yeah, so does everyone see why it's O of n? We're going from we look at each character in the string only once, because low starts from the beginning, high starts from the end. We stop when they both meet. We don't care where they meet, but we know that we've only traversed each character in the string exactly once. And how about space complexity? Yeah, sure. I can explain space complexity. So space complexity is essentially how much space your program is taking with respect to the size of the input. So let's say your length of S is n characters, right? So then say I'd created an array to keep track of, I don't know, like whatever I wanted. So if I created like an array with the size of n, with the size of my input string, then you know that the size of this array is going to be n. So your space complexity would then be O of n, because that's how much space your program is using to solve the problem. So in this case, yeah, exactly. It's O of one space, it's constant. Um, so remember, we're not counting. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm hoping most of you are familiar with big O notation. Like you don't really care about the number. So if I use like 5 integers, 10 integers, or even 100 integers, it's still constant. So yeah, since I don't have anything of length of the string, this is just constant space. And yeah, does anyone have any questions? If not, we can move to another problem that's slightly more challenging or may require more thinking at least. So you get the time complexity. You get the time complexity by essentially just analyzing the way your code runs. Loops are usually a pretty good indication. So if you have a for loop that goes through the entire input, then you know that for loop is going to take O of n time. Here we have a while loop, and we saw that we were going through the entire input string, and we realized that we were going through the entire input string exactly once. So that means one pass through the string. So if the length is n, that's how we got a time of O of n. And yes, this is the best solution. There's no way to do better than O of n time, because if you think about it, to know whether the string is a palindrome, you have to look at every character. There's no way to do it without checking the characters. So just by intuition, we kind of know that you can't do better than O of n. Ah, exactly. Okay, so we have a nested while loop. So what is the nested while loop exactly doing? So I see why it may be a little more complicated now to get the time complexity. Yes, we do have a nested loop, but let's look at it this way. Each time this while loop runs, or this while loop runs, or this while, like the statements inside this while loop run, which is these three, no matter what, we're making some progress and moving forward in our string. So over here, we move we move forward. Over here, we move backward. And if you realize, we would never look at any character again, because once, yeah, so say this is like our string, right? And if low is somewhere over here and high is somewhere over here, inside this inner while loop, let's say low moves forward to somewhere here, then we know that high can never go past low, and we also know that low can never go backwards. So we know that we're never going to check any of these characters ever again. So we're guaranteed that we look at each character exactly once, and that's how we get the time complexity of O of n. Okay, cool. Yeah, if there are no more questions, yeah, just real quick, talking about this greater than equal to, we can actually get away with greater than, because think about the case when high is equal to low. When high is equal to low, when high is equal to low, they're like both pointing to the same character, right? Like high and low are both here. So there's no point in even comparing them, because we know that the character is the same. So we know that it'll never enter this if statement. So if high and low reach the same character, then we already know that it's a palindrome if we've made it past the rest of the characters. So that's why we can just say when high is greater than low, because when they're pointing to the same character, we already know that the characters at high and low are equal. Okay, so yeah, let's mark this as completed and move on to the next problem. So there's a little more reading to do here. Um, yeah, so let's go through this together. We have an array prices for which the ith element is the price of a given stock on day I. So if we look at the sample input, 7 is the price of the stock on day 0, 1 is the price on day 1, 5 is the price on day 2, and so on. We want to design an algorithm to find the maximum profit, and you may complete as many transactions as you like. So you can buy one and sell one share of the stock multiple times. So whenever I want, I can buy a stock. Whenever I want, I can sell a stock. There's a note saying you may not engage in multiple transactions at the same time. You must sell before you buy. So I can't buy at 1, buy at 5, buy at 3, and then sell all of them at 6. once I've performed the buy operation, I have to sell it. So yeah, so as before, the first thing we want to do is make sure we understand the question. So does anyone have, yeah, does anyone have any questions? Or do you think there's any ambiguity? Anything that you want more clear? If not, then I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think about it. And no, you don't need to understand stocks to do this problem. All you just need to know. I mean, you need to know the definition of profit, I guess. Like profit is just the money you get by selling minus the money you get from buying. But that's all you need to know. This is nothing to do with stocks. I mean, this could have been the price of whatever. Okay, so so good. That is the first thing that comes to mind is just buy at low and sell at high, right? So let's see. I guess first, what are you defining as low and high? Because if you're just defining high as the maximum of the array, here you see the maximum is 7 and the minimum is 1, but you can't buy at 1 and sell at 7 because the day the price of the stock was 7 was before the day the price was 1, right? So what do you mean by buy at low and sell at high? How are you choosing the low and the high? Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. I thought you were offering a solution. But yeah, if you guys have had time to think, if anyone has any solutions, or it doesn't even have to be correct, just any thoughts to help us get started, yeah, feel free to share. Okay, so it's good. It's good. I'm happy someone's thinking of brute force because, like I said, it's best to have a solution that works first. So, brute force will be with two loops. So, what exactly is two loops? Or, yeah, like what are you doing in those loops? Okay, and someone else said use a for loop to compare the first and second element and store the lower of the two in a temporary variable. Okay, but then at like what point are you calculating the profit inside of that for loop? You're just storing variables? Like when do you actually calculate the amount of money you're making? And okay, so someone else said pick the highest number from the end of the array and lowest number from the start. Um, but I guess like when do you decide what the end of the array is and what the start is? So let's say my list of numbers is like 3, 4, 5, 7, like 1, 1, 1. Then if you picked the lowest from the start and the highest from the end, where would you how would you find those values? Because if I tried finding the lowest, I would get to this 1. And if I tried finding the highest, I would get to this 7. So this was the idea with 2 for loops. The inner loop will run from outer loop current position till the end. It will look for max profit. So you're just performing like exactly one computation. So your inner loop, so you're essentially trying to calculate the profit from buying like every single possible stock. So you're saying like, let's assume we bought the first stock, and then you're going through the rest of the array and saying, what's the max profit I can get by selling that stock? And then you're saying, let's say if I bought the second stock, and then go through the rest of the array. Okay, cool. So, um, yeah, so that is good intuition, but I think what um what some people are not seeing is that the idea that you may complete as many transactions as you like. So if I had something like, let's say, like a really simple thing, like 1, 5, 2, 10, right? So if I look for the min and the max, then I try to get 10 minus 1, which is 9 profit, right? But what if I do something like this? I buy 1, sell 5, and then I buy at 2 and sell at 10. Then my profit is 5 minus 1 plus 10 minus 2, right? Which is definitely greater than 9. So think about buy the dips and sell at peaks. Okay, I like that. Can you help define what a dip and a peak is?
Real quick, could we, instead of using for loops, could we use 2 while loops? So the first while loop, they're not nested. The first while loop, we would iterate from the beginning of the array to the end and find the lowest price. And then it would return the day that that lowest price was at. And then the second while loop would start from that day that the while loop, the first one returned, and then it would iterate through the rest of the array to find the highest point, the highest price. And then we would, before these 2 while loops, we would store into an int the starting day. So we would just be set to 0 at first. But then after that second while loop, we would store the ending day of the highest price in that marker, because we also can't backtrack in time, because we can't sell, let's say if we took the last element in the array was, let's say 7, and then we were trying to sell it at 9, which was at the first instance of the array, we can't do that. So we need to be able to handle that logic, right? So
Yeah.
that's the reason for that int. And then the entire thing would be wrapped in a while loop again, and we would loop through it until that marker day that we had was at the length of the array.
So wouldn't you run into the same issue with this example? Because you would get your lowest as 1 and then your highest as 10. So then you would try to buy at 1 and sell at 10, right?
Yes, but then you would also keep iterating through until you were at the end of the week. I know it wouldn't optimize the amount of profits, but I think that might be a starting point.
Okay.
Because it leaves room to buy another time, since we have that marker that we was talking about in the outer loop.
So what is that marker signifying exactly?
The day you're selling at, because we can only buy and sell one stock at a certain time, right? So if we, let's say, buy at the first day and then we sell on the 4th day, the marker would tell us that, hey, the day we're at is in the 4th day, and that means we only have n amount of days left to buy and sell afterwards, because the marker would take us out of the loop when it reaches the maximum amount of days in the array.
Okay. Um, okay, so yeah, I'm I'm not entirely sure whether that would work or not, but it definitely does sound a little complicated. Um, and yeah, so I think the idea with the dips and peaks is better. So yeah, I guess someone said, so if your current index is 0, compare our current position to the next position. If it's greater than our current position, we should increment the index and sell. Okay, so yeah, do you think that would give you the maximum profit? So let me just outline what the idea that someone said. You have a for loop and you're saying check next day's price minus today's price. And once you check that, you're saying if it's positive, then you want to make a sale, right? And if it's negative, you just move to the next day. So do you think that this would work? Okay, no. So why no? If it's positive, check 2 days after to see if that's, yeah, because maybe the next day would be even higher, right? So people are talking about the example, if it's like 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, then you may not want to sell at 3. Um, okay. So when do you want to sell then? How do you decide when to sell? You sell at the peak. Okay, so you want to sell when the next day's price is lower than uh, today's price. When do you want to buy then? When the next day's price is lower than the current index. So you're essentially saying the same time when you decide to sell. So when the next day's price is lower than today's price, you sell and then you immediately buy. Is that what you're saying? Not immediately. Okay. Yeah, that would make each day a sell or buy day. So, okay, someone said buy is the same format except it's opposite. So buy when the next day's price is higher than today's price. Is that right? Someone wants lower? No? Confused? Um, easy.
So hi, can I speak?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe the dips and peaks plan sounds good because for this problem, maybe we need two pointers, one which will take care of the minimum and one which can care of the maximum value. So
Okay.
we can iterate from starting to the end, and as soon as we see, like, we can uh, put a value in the minimum, like the first element is right now the minimum, and
Mm-hmm.
if the next value decreases, then we'll set it as the minimum value, and and when we see a increase, then we can increase the maximum pointer to the
Okay.
maximum value. So if the next element decreases, and if it decreases below the minimum value of that array that we are
Mhm.
already checking, then we will update the minimum, otherwise we will not update. So then I think your first example will return the right answer.
Okay. So at this point, when do you actually like calculate the profit? Because you've just told me how to update the min and max pointers.
Yeah, so once we iterate uh, like the whole array, we'll find the uh, minimum and maximum positions and their
Okay.
values, and then we'll calculate the profit at the end of the loop. Like
Okay.
minimum is a variable and maximum is a variable.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so that solution actually sounds good to me. Does everyone else sort of see what's going on here? So, so it's the same idea that a lot of other people were also saying, right? Like you basically want to keep going forward until, so in this case, you would set your min to 1 and then you see your 3, so then your max becomes 3, but then I see the 5, so then the max becomes 5, and then I see the 7 and so on, and then until my max becomes 10. Yeah, exactly. So the only part about this is storing all the min and max values, right? Is there a need to store all the min and max values? Say after this 10 I had a 2. After this 10, if I had a 2, what's going to happen? Am I going to change my min or am I going to change my max?
Uh, I think we should not change it. So
Okay.
so if we get a drop, like after the max we see a drop and it goes below the minimum, then only we'll change the minimum, otherwise we'll not uh, change anything.
Yeah, exactly. So someone else actually has the right idea. I think the new minimum would actually be a buy. So so after this point, when I see the 2, then I know that's going to be my next buy. So then at this point, I can just calculate I can just add how much ever I gained from this to my profit, right? So I can just say something like profit. I can just add max minus min to my profit, and then I can update my min as 2, and then continue with the, yeah, exactly. Then there's no need to store the values, right? Each time I do a new buy, I just check what my previous min and max was, and then yeah, and then I can just add that to my profit. So the general idea is if my values are trending upwards, I keep incrementing my max, and if the values and then if the value drops, then I add max minus min to my profit, and then I change my min to be that new value to which the stock dropped, and then I can continue doing that. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions? And yeah, if not, so let's actually just yeah, so the last thing, so we've solved the solution. Doing that will definitely work. I just want to show you a little trick here. So let's just put the 2 in there. Um, and here, let's work down here with more space. So let's say we have this, right? So at this point, so at this point, my buy and sells are going to be at 1 and 7, and then at 2 and 10, right? So if my buys and sells are happening at that point, what I'm essentially doing is I'm going to be computing 7 minus 1, and then I'm going to be computing 10 minus 2, right? But instead of but just to make the coding a little easier, because I don't want to deal with storing all this min and max and checking when everything is going to change. Do you notice that 7 minus 1 is actually the same as checking, like the difference between 1 and 7 is the same as checking the difference between 1 and 3 plus the difference between 3 and 5 plus the difference between 5 and 7. Exactly. So I think someone got it. If the current day's stock is higher than the previous day's stock, then add it to profit. And I can just keep doing this. Similarly, if I'm going from 2 to 10, and if I know I'm going to buy at 2 and sell at 10, the difference between 2 and 10 is the same as the difference between 2 and 8, plus the difference between 8 and 9, plus the difference between 9 and 10. You can sell at 3 and also buy at 3. No, you can't sell at 3 and buy at 3, but this is so I'm not buying and selling the stock. I'm just trying to find a new way to calculate my profit. I'm still buying at 1 and selling at 7, and then buying at 2 and selling at 10. But what I'm saying is, to calculate my profit, that my profit is just the difference between 1 and 7, and that can also be calculated as the difference between 1 and 3 plus the difference between 3 and 5 plus the difference between 5 and 7, because I'm essentially just trying to calculate 7 minus 1, right? So I can just do minus 5 plus 5 minus 3 plus 3, right? I just added 0. I just did some math here. But now if I put some parentheses over here, then you notice how this correlates to your input array, where the difference between 7 and 1 is just the difference between 7 and 5, and then 3 and 5, and then 1 and 3. So you may get mad that the code is literally this simple, but all you have to do is, what's my array called? Prices. Yeah, all you have to do is just add the the difference between the two values to your your profit. So the reason I have the max here is because if it's negative, I don't want to add it, right? If it's like 2 minus 7, at the 7 and 2, I don't want to perform that transaction. So I'm saying check the price, check the difference in today's price and yesterday's price, and either add that value or just add 0. So if this value is positive, then it'll add this value. Otherwise, it'll just add 0. And yeah, that's That's pretty much all you need for this problem. So it simplifies. Um, but yeah, does anyone have any questions about this problem? Yeah, I know, right? It's definitely not expected that the code is simple, but what does integer.max do? So integer.max just returns the max between two different values. So integer.max a comma b would just return the larger value a or b. Yeah, sure. I can go over the for loop again. So essentially what I'm doing is checking the difference between the current day's stock price, right? Prices at I, and yesterday's stock price, prices at I minus one. And I know that